She was hired as a maid, but no one expected the billionaire would fall in love with her and make her his wife. He did not expect a maid to change his life. Her name was Jasmine. She arrived on a rain-soaked morning with a single bag and a small hope. She wore a plain dress and the tired shoes of someone who had learned to walk long roads. She carried no pride on her shoulders, only a careful quiet. For years she had scrubbed floors and cleaned windows, and each job left a thin layer of patience on her skin. She had been a maid without a future for as long as memory reached. The house that hired her looked like a castle by the river. Its walls gleamed like brushed silver at noon. The man who lived inside that house was known to everyone in the city. He was tall, precise, and distant. They called him Stephen, the billionaire who built towers and signed deals with a quick nod. The papers used his name as a headline and his face as a quiet warning that wealth could be a shield. On her first day, she met not a family, but machines and silence. The room smelled of lemon and leather. Jasmine learned the routines quickly. She learned the place of his towels, the exact fold of his shirts, where he kept the spare keys. Stephen did not speak much. When he entered a room, he moved like a man who practiced not to leave his shadow. He watched life as if it were a painting he was not meant to touch. People said he had everything but joy. There were rumors of broken marriages, of friends who left, of nights spent in empty rooms. He had a mind that measured risk and a heart that had learned to count costs. Jasmine did not know those rumors. She simply reacted to the small things: a window streaked with rain, a plate left on the table. She treated the house like a home because she had cleaned too many houses that pretended to be homes. At first, their lives did not intersect. She cleaned, he worked, and silence flowed between them like clean water. She arranged his books with care. She polished his glassware until the room remembered the sound of rain. Sometimes she hummed quietly while sweeping. The sound was a thin thread in the hush of the mansion. He would glance up sometimes, curious about this small sound that dared to break his calm. The moment that changed everything was small and almost ordinary. A stray dog wandered into the garden, shivering under a lemon tree. Jasmine found it and wrapped it in an old towel. She gave it water and fed it bread with her own hand. Stephen noticed when he came downstairs. He noticed the care and how she offered the dog her fingers instead of ordering it away. He had never seen anyone treat small things with such steady softness. Days turned into weeks. The dog stayed, and the house learned new rhythms. The staff began to smile more. Jasmine's presence was quiet but persistent. She listened when he spoke alone into his phone and left the room before the end of his sentences. Once, when a storm took the power, she sat in the hallway holding a flashlight like a small sun, and the billionaire found himself sitting by her side. For the first time in years, he did not plan the next move. He let the darkness sit with them, and it felt foreign and gentle. He was alert to everything that affected his business, but he was not alert to the way his chest felt near her. Love was not a thing he had planned to buy or build. It arrived like a quiet guest. He watched how she moved and noticed details he had never trained himself to notice. The way she tied a scarf, the calluses on her hands, the small scar above her eyebrow. Each small observation knitted a new shape inside him that his old life could not hold. Jasmine, in turn, had rules of her own. She would not be confused by money or promises. She had seen how words could wear thin. She held close the memory of her mother's voice and the small village kitchen where she learned to be kind. She did not dream of fine clothes or glittering parties. She wanted safety, a steady wage, and the chance to sleep without worry. Yet she found herself waiting a little when she knew his steps were near. Rumors are a dangerous wind. When people in the city saw the billionaire take note of a maid, they wove stories. There were whispers among the staff and quiet conjectures over tea in the market. Some said he wanted her because he liked a different kind of company. Others said she wanted him for his money. Neither was true at first. They were both wrong and both right. The truth was stranger. Two human beings learning how to be gentle with each other while the world watched. Change came slowly. He began to give her small gifts that meant more than their price. A warm shawl in winter, a cup for her tea. He added a small fruit tree to the garden with a sign that read for Jasmine. He did not announce these things. He only placed them where she would see. Jasmine received each gift with a careful nod. She did not throw herself into them. But each gift felt like a letter written in a language she did not yet understand. Their days filled with moments that carried the weight of newness. He taught her how to read certain newspapers he kept for meetings. She taught him how to listen to the hum of the house and find joy in small routines. They walked the garden, each step learning how to open. They were not a spectacle. They were an odd, quiet pair that did not yet know how to be seen in public without being dissected by gossip. But life does not hand peace on a silver tray. There were people who wanted to pull them apart. Margaret, who had always run the household affairs, watched with a narrow eye. She warned him of reputation and of board members who would question his judgment. There were former lovers who found the news of his attention hard to swallow. They sent polite notes and thin threats. Jasmine felt the weight of eyes that measured her by the wrong ruler. A test came that neither of them could ignore. The company he built faced scandal. A contract was disputed, and a journalist dug at the roots. Suddenly, Stephen's name was on the front page for reasons that had nothing to do with his home. He retreated into late nights of meetings and legal files. In the public's eye, every private choice looked like a weakness. He began to fear that his new warmth could be used as a wedge against him. Jasmine watched the change and wished she could fix it with bleach and elbow grease. She had no language for law or finance, but she had courage. One night, when the house felt like a ship in rough seas, she brought him tea and sat across from him. He was tired in a way that looked like surrender. Jasmine did not ask questions about the scandal. She simply listened. She let him say the things he needed to say, without judgment. This small act became an anchor. He found himself telling her things no one had ever heard. He spoke of his father's loneliness and the emptiness of celebration without a hand to hold. He admitted that he had always measured love like he measured deals, with the same neat columns and expected returns. But being near her taught him that not all accounts can be balanced on paper. Some must be balanced with courage and patience. The city watched them through a lens that favored drama. Editorial pages called their relationship a diversion, and late-night hosts made jokes. Jasmine felt each headline like a cold wind on her back. She worried her presence could harm the man who had shown her mercy. He, in turn, worried that his world could swallow her whole and leave her smaller than before. He tried to protect her by keeping her close, and that protection sometimes looked like control. There was a night when she pushed back gently. A disagreement about a dinner where she was expected to wear a dress she did not own led to a moment of truth. She told him, simply and without drama, that she would not be paraded like an ornament. She wanted to be chosen for who she was, not displayed as a peace offering. He listened with the calm of a man learning how to lose and then win someone back. He did not argue. He only apologized and promised to change. Their bond grew not from grand gestures, but from small refusals and small promises kept. He began to step away from the meetings that required showmanship and stayed home to learn how to cook a simple meal. She began to accept help without feeling ashamed. She opened a small box of letters he had never read to his mother and found a child hidden in them. They taught each other to carry the weight of life together, not alone. Yet the past has a way of finding the present. Donald arrived in the city with acclaim. He said that Jasmine had taken from him long ago and that she owed him. He made noise, small threats that could become larger if fed. Jasmine felt the old shame bubble up and the fear that history could rewrite her future. She went to Stephen and told him her truth willingly, with the clarity of someone who had nothing to hide. He listened and did not flinch. Instead of turning away, he stood with her publicly. He held her hand in a simple gesture on the day the false accusations were read. People expected a grand speech. He offered none. He offered presence. The crowd saw the sincerity in a way speeches could not create. When the claims were investigated, they dissolved like mist under the morning sun. Truth, like water, found its level. The victory did not clear every shadow. There were nights Jasmine still woke with a fear in her throat, and nights he worried about the next storm. But the shared trouble had bound them. They had been tested and found willing. Love, in its simplest form, became their habit. They learned to split silence, so it did not weigh on one of them alone. They learned that mercy could be more constant than law. Months passed. The city began to soften. People who had whispered now nodded politely when they saw them. Some still gossiped, but gossip is a poor foundation for a life. They traveled quietly, not to show off, but to learn each other's small habits. He showed her a quiet beach where the sand was like sugar and the fishermen mended nets with slow hands. She taught him how to knead dough and to be patient with a stubborn loaf. They celebrated small successes, like a harvest declared in a tiny kitchen. One evening, under a sky freckled with stars, he asked her to share a life beyond the house. He did not kneel with a ring like in stories. He sat beside her on a bench and said simply that he wanted to be her partner. She looked at him for a long time. She thought of her mother, of the years of dust and detergent, of the sound of her own pulse when she stepped into a new room. Then she said yes, but not because of ring or promise. She said yes because she believed him when he promised to keep choosing her. The wedding was small by his old standards and large by her friend's idea of a celebration. They invited the people who mattered. Her childhood neighbor, the gardener, his quiet lawyer, and a few who had stood by them. There was no red carpet, no showy fireworks. There were songs that made the heart remember forgotten roads, and a meal that tasted like many kitchens stitched together. In the crowd, people cried for reasons they could not name. Some cried for love found. Some cried because they had lowered their armor and allowed themselves to hope. After the ceremony, they did not move into a different life. They moved into the same life with new names for ordinary things. He learned to wash dishes without counting time. She learned to sit at meetings when she wanted to, and he learned to listen when she spoke of simple things like the price of onions and the way the light fell in their hallway. They kept the dog that first met them under the lemon tree. They planted more fruit trees and watched them become small promises that matured into shade. Still, not all was easy. Wealth brings attention, and that attention can be sharp. Old friends expected access and gifts. New acquaintances measured their worth by how close they stood to his shadow. Jasmine faced those pressures with a quiet code. She never forgot where she had come from. She used her new voice to ask for fair wages for the staff and to start a small program that taught young women how to work with dignity and to demand respect. People who had once stepped around her stopped and asked for her help. She said yes sometimes and no when she needed rest. Their love grew like a tree that had roots in stubborn soil. Storms came, but the tree bent and did not break. They learned to forgive public mistakes and private errors. He learned to admit when he was wrong. She learned to ask for what she needed instead of hoping it would be offered. In the quiet hours, they read letters to each other and kept secrets that were kind. Their home was not perfect, but it was warm in the way that bread is warm when pulled from an oven. Years passed, and Jasmine became more than a memory of a maid. She became a woman who could navigate the maps of both worlds. She moved with the grace of someone who had known loss and found joy anyway. He watched her and sometimes wondered how a life could shift so completely in a few patient moves. He had given her comfort, and she had given him purpose. They both learned that love needs both shelter and labor, both gifts and work. Their story was not written by fame, but by small, repeatable acts. They made a life that looked ordinary from close up and miraculous from far away. Neighbors saw a couple who carried groceries side by side and argued about the best way to peel potatoes. Children in the village came to the house to learn how to plant seeds and how to smell rain in the soil. They taught others what they had learned, that dignity is more than a job title and that kindness can be practical. Once, in the quiet of the night, he whispered a truth that had become clear to him. He told her that the first thing he had bought was not a car or a building, but time. He wanted to spend it better now, to measure his days not by profit, but by memory. Jasmine smiled and told him that the first thing she had bought was a small mirror, so she could see herself clearly in the morning light. They both laughed softly at the smallness and the honesty of those purchases. They faced the world together, sometimes clumsy, sometimes brave. When new troubles arrived, they met them as a team. When joy found them, they celebrated without counting the costs. They learned to keep agreements without making life into a ledger. They learned that money is a useful servant, but a terrible master. Between them, they kept a steady line of trust that grew stronger with each ordinary morning. People would often ask how Maid and a billionaire could find such balance. The answer, simple and stubborn, was that neither had pretended to be what they were not. He did not pretend to be poor or humble. She did not pretend to crave wealth. They met in the middle where real things grow. Honesty, patience, and a willingness to do the small things. Their love was not a fairy tale. It was a set of decisions made again and again. Years later, when old photographs yellowed at the edges and their hair showed thin silver threads, they still sat under the lemon tree and watched seasons pass. They would hold hands while the dogs slept at their feet and talk about the silly mistakes they had made when they were young and bold. They kept a house full of small sounds, the laugh of a child, the clatter of a spoon, the whisper of a page turning. In the last chapter of their life together, Jasmine remembered the first rain she had walked into with an empty bag and a careful hope. She smiled at the journey from that night to this quiet morning. She had been hired as a maid, yes, but what happened next had nothing to do with titles. It had to do with hands that fixed things, with a heart that forgave old fear, and with two people who kept choosing each other. She was a wife now, not because she had been given a crown, but because someone had learned how to love her every day. What did you think of the story? Tell me which part moved you. Subscribe to Beyond Yesterday on YouTube for more stories.